James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, today marks the day that Ioane Teixeira was deported or is being deported back to Kiribati. He's a man who sought to be classed as the world's first climate refugee. Now, I understand that the merits of this particular case are debatable and that we don't have a sufficient classification for persons who are displaced by the consequences of climate change. He has a wife and 3 children who, as I understand it, will be joining him in a week in Kiribati. And for those people who have been to Kiribati, they will see that on a fairly regular basis, that island is uninhabitable because the sea levels rise and groundwater rises to the point when it is coming up through their plantations, through the bases of their houses, and this is a sign of things to come. Now, New Zealand has no plan for this. There are 179,000 people in Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Nauru and Tuvalu, who will be the first people in the world who will lose their countries and who will be displaced as a result of the consequences of climate change. Those countries are arguing that we need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And they are asking countries like New Zealand and Australia and others around the world to cut our emissions to a level that would limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. But in the last few decades, temperatures have already risen 1 degree and the sea is already rising. We often think about climate change as something that is happening in the future to other people or to polar bears somewhere on the other side of the world, when in fact it is happening now, it is happening to us and it is happening to our Pacific neighbours. And we do not have a plan to deal with it. In New Zealand, we have adopted a reduction target for our emissions of 11% below our 1990 levels by the year 2030. This is being classed as an inadequate response by those organisations who are scientifically tracking what it is, all the commitments countries are making, how they would add up. And currently, if every country in the world was to behave the way that New Zealand was planning to behave, we would be on track for a 3 to 4 temperature degree increase over the next 100 years or so, and that would lead to what is referred to as catastrophic climate change. It would see huge sea level rise, and it would see not just those 4 countries of Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Nauru and Tuvalu losing all of their territory, but significant reductions in the territory of other island states, including New Zealand, where so much of our people live within sight of the shore. So much of our infrastructure is located at sea level or very close to sea level. So when the government says that we are doing our fair share, this is actually an inaccurate statement. It would require New Zealand to look at cuts of around 40% below 1990 levels or more for us to have anything close to an adequate response to limiting emissions, to limiting global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees, or in that sort of zone. So when the government says that we are committed, that the government is committed to limiting emissions to ensure that global warming only increases by 2 degrees, our own behaviour is completely inconsistent with that. Our own behaviour would actually lead to a 3 to 4 degree temperature rise. So when we say that we're committed to a 2 degree temperature rise and then our own actions are to increase temperatures by 3 to 4 degrees, what that means is that we are relying on other countries to do the work for us. We're actually freeloading on other countries. And the problem, of course, that we've got is that there are many other countries in the world that are also planning on freeloading on the works of other people. So we cannot both say, on the one hand, that our actions will be consistent with a 3 to 4 degree temperature rise, and at the same time say that we're committed to a 2 degree temperature rise, and at the same time say that we're committed to the people of the Pacific and to those small island states. We need to commit to a 40% reduction target below 1990 levels by the year 2030. We need to give those islands some chance, but we also need to plan for populations in our neighbouring countries that are displaced? What is our plan for the 179,000 people that currently live on those islands? Are we planning on making territory in New Zealand, well above water level, available to them? Mr. Speaker, the government has no plan. It's been completely inconsistent in its position, and we would argue that it needs to come straight with New Zealand and with the Pacific.
The Honourable